I'm not entirely sure what is coming. I've got my suspicions. I know that there's some huge things that are getting ready to happen right around now. There are so many misdirects, and a lot of people have taken issue with me for taking the stance that I do about voting. And a lot of people believe that it's all from a mindset of ignorance. But it isn't. I'm not going to go into too much more than that. I'm just going to say it isn't. And it's up to you to figure that out for yourself. I'm not going to try to convince anybody. I've said what I've said, and what I've said is what I've said, and that's the way it's going to be. That, it is what it is. But there's something else that is going on. And if you take the time to slow down and not do anything except be, just recognize yourself, recognize the world around you, recognize the different thoughts, why things are happening the way they are in your head. You're not going to figure out what's going on in the world, but you can at least put some things together in your head. Once you start slowing down enough, you can start looking at some of the things that are around you, like something as simple as a blade of grass or an ant that just walking around, crawling around on the ground. And you can recognize a part of yourself in that ant somehow. Once you start recognizing yourself in other things in the way that I've just described, because it's not a definition, you can't define these things. Words get in the way of trying to speak of these things, which is why they sound so ridiculous when somebody says something. I mean, there's so many things that are real, that have a lot more reality to them than things like voting, which we hold to be real. People are allowing themselves to get distracted from the things that are actually important. And the more we feed into the distractions, the more we support the creation of the evil that we see around us. Now, none of us are intentionally doing evil. None of us are intentionally trying to be terroristic. At least that's my assumption for the most part. And for somebody like me who looks at the world in generally, well, up until maybe the last decade, generally optimistic terms, which I still try to hold, to say that the people that they have lived, struggled, fought with are terrorists is difficult. Because once you've lived with the people for so long, it doesn't matter who or what they are, you're gonna love them. And I do love the people of America. I don't love their actions. And their actions are ignorant. It doesn't matter who you think should have won. And this is the point that most people have been failing to recognize. People generally assume that if I'm saying, this president sucks, then I'm voting for the other one. And I've repeatedly, over and over and over and over and over and over, said voting for either one of them is only going to bring more problems. They set up the election in such a fashion. You don't actually get a choice when you vote. If you did, we wouldn't have the presidents selected for us before we vote. Do you get it yet? Oh, well, we voted to, trim down the herd or whatever you want to call it. Okay, sure. Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. The fact of the matter remains, every good step that America has ever done for its people has been taken back twofold in the next following years. Now, that's with people that at least have some sense of decency. I've already warned people about what they've already done. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the show. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the show. Everybody wants to either be hollering angrily or, cheering wildly for the success failure that they perceive this to be. And what nobody's getting is, if you're perceiving this as a success regardless of who won, you're missing the point entirely. You've gotten caught up in the sports conduct competition attitude of, I am going to win no matter what. Competition divides. People think that it's all about sportsmanship and teamwork, but competition divides. Think about it. When you get somebody who's just starting to get into sports and they don't know how to work with a team, but they're good at what they do, I mean, it's obvious. Everything that we really needed to know has been right in front of us all along. The problem is we have been trained in various ways to ignore the very things that we should be paying attention to. Case in point, just get a job. How responsible if you get a job, and how irresponsible if you don't have one. Anybody who has a full-time job and a family is failing at one or the other. If you don't understand how I can be saying that, and look, there's a lot of you out there that pull superhuman effort and really make things work out of freaking nowhere. So, kudos to you. Don't get me wrong. I've got respect, but I'm telling you, you've been duped, because essentially your government has been turning up the heat by making taxes higher and money devalued. And you're caught between the two. And you haven't figured out how you have agreed to allow yourself to be bent over the barrel just as badly as you are. And if you really go to recognize just how badly you have agreed to destroy yourself, not now. You're meant to feel good right now. That's the trick. take a real hard look at the history of this country and the history of how money has been used, the attitudes of people towards money, and what kind of advancements have actually been made as money grew not only more popular and even dominant, but something that's essentially expected without question. And all these things are things that people say, oh, this is stupid. Why would I even attempt to look? It's a waste of my time and energy. But you're never going to know until you look. That's the problem. Well, prove it to me. One of the most intelligently ignorant things you can say. What do I mean by that? I keep telling people we've been programmed and educated to be ignorant. Now, if you are trained from 5 years old in kindergarten to essentially reject your nature and rely on artifice, then you get to a point where you walk out the door and you don't see anything because you're already seeing what you're expecting to see. You literally become blind to the world in its actuality. Think about how many people are walking down the streets hitting light posts because they're on their phone while they're walking. I mean, I've done it a couple of times myself. I mean, there's people out there that have done it that just won't admit it. So let's get real. The reason why we're failing as a country is because we aren't paying attention to the fact we don't have a country. We have an occupation. A hostile occupation that me, because of my bloodline, I'm essentially a part of this. I grew up a part of it. I have had no choice. I have tried to point out how to get out of it, and I have been given no way to do so myself. I mean, seriously, people, with what I do know, I feel like Michael Jordan being put on the freaking basketball court and being told to make a shot without the basketball. That's where I'm at. The genius that I do have available to me to give, everybody's determined to not just ignore, but outright reject. And it's sad. Because the only thing I'm really doing is trying to give some options for some freedom. I don't ask for money. I've never asked for money. There's been a few times where I've accepted money from people that have offered it to me. I have become increasingly more strict on that. I do not like handling money of any sort, because the monies that we have today, for the most part, are the monies that are manipulated and controlled by various governments. So every time you use it, you are making the criminal actions of these countries possible. This is why I don't want to use money. I don't really have anything against money. Quite frankly, I wouldn't mind using something similar to Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin would be a bit, you don't want to walk down the street with a pocket full of Bitcoin. You're not going to be able to buy anything from it. Not because if somebody's going to rob you, obviously. Oh, you took my phone. Okay, great. Locked out. Haha. But I mean, That's the way to go, really. It's decentralized. It's not as readily manipulatable as the currencies that we have. And the fact that we haven't been paying attention to the way our currency has been manipulated and how easily people have been duped into artificially inflating their own currency. I mean, come on, minimum wage, look, raise the minimum wage. Oh, brilliant. Now the bread that used to cost 50 cents costs $2. Lovely. Good job, America. And you thanked the people for doing it. I was laughing at you the whole time. I'm sorry. I keep trying to point these things out, but I keep getting my head snapped off instead of anybody listening. Everybody wants to think that the only thing I know how to do is insult the things that they hold sacred. And what they're failing to recognize is what they're holding sacred is already the insult. And if you look at it close and really take the view of what I'm trying to say to heart, because I'm not just pointing finger at everybody else. I've got to look at my own blind spots too. Do I know them all? Heavens, no. Nobody's ever going to. But the simple fact that I'm looking is a start. And that's where everybody around me seems to be failing. They don't want to look at what they don't want to look at. And what people need to figure out is how to take the personal responsibility to look at the things that they've been refusing to look at, because that's where their ignorance is based. They aren't doing it purposely exactly. It's reactionary at this point because they don't even realize how they could be ignorant. And it's virtually impossible to tell somebody that they're ignorant, because the first thing they're going to do is point their finger back at you and say, well, aren't you ignorant? Yes, this is the whole point. And I'm trying to point out how I figured out I'm ignorant. Where am I ignorant? How am I ignorant? All those things. Those are things that you should be asking yourself. I ask them about to myself all the time. It is a healthy practice. People don't realize just how rough it's going to get just yet. But they don't realize that it wouldn't matter who was there for this to be coming through. America's been asking for what's getting ready to happen for a very long time. It's still possible, maybe possible, to change things so they aren't as bad as what I remember them to be. And I'll leave it at that. You can take it however you want at that point, because, well, to try to explain every bit of that in words is just going to make me sound like a loon, which I've already admitted that I'm crazy. But in a crazy world, you got to be crazy. And I'm the sanest crazy person you'll ever know. I think that's about it for tonight. Rising Angel signing off. Going under Crazy Talk Instructionals.